Okay, so it's illegal to use these curses, or maybe it's illegal to use these curses unless you're in dire need. No, McGonagall could just use Accio. Maybe if you're the good guys? I don't understand wizarding law. So, now that you can't be a Jedi due to workplace dangers, you're turning to wizardry. Well, good news. I happen to be on a quest to become the next Harry Potter. Let's go! After a lot of calculations, I've realized you can't just be a wizard. So, let's go to the items. If we want to go underwater, we need to turn to Gillyweed. Gillyweed is a plant that looks like rat's tails and gives you gills and flipper. So, how would this work? Well, I don't know, but students at the University of Leicester do. Leicester? I don't know. These British and their funny words like letter tables and Jake Polydabberoos. I'm going to call them the Lee Boys. They thankfully did most of the work here. But first, let me explain gills. Gills work much like lungs. Fish have cells which take oxygen in the water and exchange it with deoxygenated blood cells in their gills. The mechanisms work as water rushes in open mouth because of the change in pressure. Then the mouth closes and water is forced out of the gills. This is all good, but does it work for humans? The short answer, nope. You see, the oxygen level in the air is 210,000 parts per million. But in water, it's only about 4 to 8 parts per million. That means to get enough oxygen, gills need a large surface area. If they didn't, fish would suffocate from the lack of oxygen. This is where the Lee Boys come in. There are 2 problems pointed out. The gills on Harry Potter has a surface area of 60 centimeters, which would mean the lake would have to flow at 2.46 meters per second, or twice the normal airspeed. That doesn't matter, as the Lee Boys pointed out. Harry keeps his mouth shut, rendering the entire process useless. Now, let's look at the invisibility cloak. This one has been studied to death, so I'll keep it simple. There are a lot of college kids who want to do things unseen, so naturally there are different approaches. There's one method where researchers have taken advantage of mirages. You know, the things that show up in movies whenever they're in a desert? Well, they exist. Students at Dallas University have manipulated them to make things invisible, and it has a near-instant on-off switch. Mirages work by the heat of the area bending the light towards your eyes instead of bouncing off the intended object. This makes you see, say, the sky on the sand. Your brain is smart and realizes there's no way the sky is on the ground. But because it's blue, your brain jumps to the conclusion that it's water. The light bends due to the heat. The cloak does the same thing. They use carbon nanotubes so they can conduct heat, and they use it to heat the air around them. The tubes are only a molecule thick, but as strong as steel because of the tensile strength. These can be also used in armor. Researchers heated up the carbon nanotubes, and they in turn heat the air around them, bending the light and shielding the contents within from prying eyes. The other method is the lens method. It's less complicated and only costs $50. The University of Rochester created a setup that would hide what was in front but not shift the background when you adjust your angle. Now, let's go through a lightning round. What else can we make? How about Skelegro, a potion that grows back bones in the night? The U.S. Army, in fact, is working on and has already made medicine that can enhance the body's healing effect. Flying cars? No problem. The company Terrafugia is working on a flying car which is commercially available. That one is more of a plane though, so you might want the Defense Advanced Research Agency's self-flying Humvee. If you want a single flying experience, there's no broomstick which can fly, but there are jetpacks. Want a sorting hat? Ryan Anderson has created a hat that talks with some work from IBM Watson. It can tell you which house you belong in. For a Marauders map, the company Cambridge Silicon Radio created an app that lets you map out a building and the people within. And thanks to Kuro Nabe, you can buy yourself a self-stirring pot. And now, for what's my favorite part of this episode, a segment called Is It Legal? Where I look at the actions in this series and ask, is it legal! Now, in the 5th book, Umbridge uses her blood quill to cut messages in the hand of students. Here in the US, that would fall under cruel and inhumane punishments and child abuse. But what about Britain? Now, the National Guidance for Child Protection in Scotland, where Hogwarts is located, says that Scotland wants, and I quote, "The Scottish government wants Scotland to be the best place in the world for children and young people to grow up so that they can be successful learners, confident individuals, effective contributors, and responsible citizens," which I find hilarious. Back to the subject at hand. They also define abuse as abuse and neglect are forms of maltreatment of a child. Now, I think that Umbridge doesn't treat them very well, but let's be sure. They define maltreatment as someone who inflicts physical harm. That means Umbridge is going to the Who's-Go. Yes, that's a real name for jail. In England, child abuse is a criminal offense, but it's hard to tell if the Dursleys are technically committing abuse. On June 23rd, they said they won't let him eat until Christmas, but obviously they know and don't try to stop the fact that he's alive. Now, let's move on to Fudge and some different charges. In the Goblet of Fire, he has the Dementors suck the soul out of Bartemius Crouch Jr. Now, I'm going to count this as capital punishment because it's, quote, worse than death. Now, does he deserve this? Short answer, no. Just like in America, Brits have the right to a speedy, fair, and public trial of impartial peers. Now, another legal problem is that the death penalty as relating to murder was abolished in 1964, but if he was charged with the death penalty for other offenses, he would be eligible because the death penalty wasn't completely abolished until 1998, a solid 4 years later. So, Fudge could and should go to the calaboose. But the Ministry of Magic might have different laws. So, under their law, should he die? Again, no. He commits all 3 of the unforgivables, but if we use Bellatrix Lestrange as an example, a fellow Death Eater, he should only be thrown back into Azkaban. We do not know if Bella has used the Imperius Curse, but we know she's used the Cruciatus and Avada Kedavra. These curses, we know, each can give a lifetime in prison, and if Bellatrix is any tell, multiple offenses doesn't warrant capital punishment. So, more reason to put Fudge to the glass house. Oh, and Sirius Black also has right to go to a trial first, even if he pleads guilty, so he should never have been thrown into Azkaban. Bad guys aren't the only problem, though. Dumbledore uses Veritaserum, forcing Crouch Jr. to speak, but British people have the right to remain silent. And let me add that McGonagall and Harry both use unforgivable curses, so they could also go to the Stony Lonesome. Before you get all excited that you could be a wizard, you might want to check the local laws first. Tell me, what's your favorite magical item? And which is your favorite slang for jail? I'll put up a poll in the iCard. The Star Wars videos are here, and subscribe here. Leave the comment section slur-free and stay out of the stockade.